My brother didn't insult me. He exhibited me. We were standing in the atrium of the Harborview Museum under a ceiling that looked like it had been designed specifically to reflect money back onto the people who already had it. There was a string quartet somewhere behind a marble column. There were flutes of champagne everywhere. There were donors laughing softly, the way people laugh when they're trying to sound effortless. And then my brother Evan, 30, in a tuxedo that fit like it had been stitched directly onto his ego, walked right up to me, grabbed my wrist, lifted my hand into the chandelier light, and announced to the nearest circle of polished strangers, "Smells like solvent. Still scrubbing dead paper for pennies, Mara?" A polite ripple of laughter spread through the group. Not cruelty, not even malice, just that casual, comfortable amusement rich people use when they need a human moment and you happen to be the object. I looked at my hand. The nails were short. Clean, technically. But if you work with old adhesive, with stabilizers, with conservation chemicals, you learn that clean is a surface-level idea. There's always a trace, a faint smell of ethanol, a stubborn residue along the cuticle that takes 3 washes and a prayer to remove. Evan tilted his head like he was giving a toast. "Meanwhile," he said, voice louder now, "Northline Group is acquiring Caldera Systems on Monday morning. 9 a.m. sharp, 62 billion, cash and stock. I'm leading the integration. I'm literally changing the world." He said it like the world was a stage and he'd finally been handed the spotlight he deserved. I didn't even care about the donors. I didn't care about the strangers' laughter. Strangers laugh at whatever the loudest person tells them to. So I turned my eyes to my parents. My mother, Lillian, held her champagne flute like it was a lifeline. She didn't look at me, not even a quick glance that said, "I saw that, I'm sorry." She just made a small sound, something between a sigh and a resignation, and turned her shoulder, blocking me from view like I was an embarrassment she could physically rearrange. My father, Robert, took a sip of his drink and stared at the glass wall behind me, as if he could find a more convenient reality reflected there. No defense. No, that's enough. No, don't speak to your sister like that. Nothing. It wasn't Evan's insult that did it. I've lived with Evan's insults for years. He has a talent for cruelty that looks like charisma from a safe distance. It was the silence. The easy, practiced silence. The silence that said, my humiliation wasn't a problem. My humiliation was the natural order of things. Before I continue, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Let's wish each other a happy 2026. And if you've ever been underestimated by your own family, keep listening. Because by Monday morning, my brother's big win became the most expensive mistake of his life. Arguments are messy. They leave jagged edges like torn paper. My family loves messy because messy gives them more surface area to cut you with later. I prefer clean cuts. So I didn't yank my hand away. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't do anything that would give them a dramatic story to retell at brunch. I simply extracted my wrist from Evan's grip, smoothed the sleeve of my 3-year-old dress, and said, "Congratulations." Then I turned around and walked out through the heavy glass doors. Behind me, I heard laughter again. Evan's, and then the donors. And then, worst of all, my mother's small, delicate laugh that always appeared when she wanted to be on the winning side of a moment. The night air outside hit my face like an honest slap. It stripped away the suffocating perfume, the money, the polished entitlement. I breathed in and felt my body unclench, not because I was calm, but because I was finally out of their atmosphere. I got into my car, an aging gray sedan with a dent above the rear wheel. Reliable, quiet, invisible. The kind of car my mother used to ask me to park around the corner when I visited, as if my vehicle could contaminate her driveway's reputation. I drove. Tears are bad for archival paper. They stain. They warp. They make damage where there doesn't need to be damage. They're also useless in finance. So I didn't cry. I drove away from this museum's bright glass and into the older parts of the city, where the streetlights flicker and the storefronts don't bother trying to impress anyone. I parked behind the Maritime Archive where I work, the kind of place tourists skip because it doesn't have experiences, just quiet rooms and records that smell like time. On paper, I'm a conservator. I restore ship logs, maps, letters, paper so fragile it feels like it might turn to dust if you breathe wrong. I work in a lab that's clean and bright and boring, because boring is what you need when you're trying to keep history from falling apart. I unlocked the door and stepped into my lab. The silence inside was different from the silence at the gala. The silence at the gala was rejection. It was social death. This silence was focus. It was purpose. It was the soft hum of climate control systems doing their job. It was the kind of quiet that doesn't punish you. It holds you steady. Most people think my world is small. Glue, brushes, cotton swabs, pH testing, tiny repairs no one notices unless they go wrong. And that's true. But it's not all of it. Behind the lab is a restricted records room, climate-controlled, access-logged, the kind of space where the archive keeps donor agreements, acquisitions paperwork, and collections that can't be displayed because they're too fragile or too valuable or too politically inconvenient. In the corner of that room is an old steel cabinet for oversized charts. It looks like institutional furniture, the kind of thing you ignore. If you slide the bottom drawer all the way out, press the hidden latch, and enter a code on a keypad concealed behind the label plate, the cabinet unlocks a narrow, reinforced door set into the wall behind it. No lasers, no movie theatrics. Real security is boring. That's why it works. I stepped through. The air changed immediately, cooler, filtered, smelling faintly of ozone and electronics. The sound softened, insulated. The lighting shifted from fluorescent honesty to clean, controlled LEDs. Inside was a small office suite, quiet and unremarkable in design, except for what it held. Encrypted lines, private servers, and 6 monitors that did not show preservation schedules. They showed markets. This wasn't a lair. It wasn't a fantasy. It was a control room. Because I'm not only Mara the conservator. I'm Mara, the managing partner of Nightjar Capital. Nightjars are birds you don't notice until it's too late. They blend into bark and shadow. They survive by being overlooked. For years, I let my family believe I was behind. I let Evan believe he was the only one who understood power. Because when people think you're harmless, they stop guarding themselves. They speak too freely. They take bigger risks. They sign uglier contracts. They announce their plans to rooms full of people who clap for noise. And that is how leverage is built. I sat at my desk, opened a file, and watched Evan's world unfold in clean, cold numbers. Caldera systems. That was Evan's obsession. Not because it was glamorous, because it was foundational. Caldera wasn't the kind of AI company that goes viral. It didn't make cute demos. It didn't sell dreams. It built infrastructure. Quiet systems that other companies rely on. The kind of tech that doesn't trend, but becomes necessary. The kind of company that turns into a cornerstone without ever asking permission. Northline Group, Evan's employer, had been courting Caldera for months. It was all over the industry press. Rumors leaked on purpose. Anonymous sources. People familiar with the matter. Evan's name always slipped into the narrative like an intentional perfume. He strutted through interviews like he'd personally negotiated world peace. And while he was busy being visible, I was busy being accurate, because headlines are theater, acquisitions are structure. The real story isn't what's said on stage, it's in the cap table. The voting rights, the tender thresholds, the holding vehicles, the debt covenants, the parts people don't read because reading isn't sexy. Evan never checked the back end. He never noticed that several key shareholders weren't random funds. They were entities connected to a chain of ownership that ended in one place. Nightjar, me. While Evan bragged about closing the deal Monday morning at 9, I had already spent months positioning quietly, not with announcements, with phone calls, with paperwork, with patience, with small, boring moves that compound into control. He was right about the time. He was wrong about the buyer. I initiated the final signature sequence. A clean confirmation screen appeared. Authorization required. I typed my credentials, confirmed the legal entity, verified the funds transfer, and clicked execute. There was no rush of adrenaline, no triumphant music, just a progress bar moving toward inevitability. I leaned back and watched data streams flow like a river made of numbers. People always ask, when someone eventually learns the truth, why hide? Why let your family treat you like you're nothing? Why let your parents look at you with that mixture of disappointment and charity? The answer is simple: leverage. In nature, the most dangerous predators aren't the ones roaring in the clearing. They're the ones that look like rocks, like shadows, like nothing. I didn't hide because I wanted to be mysterious. I hid because my family doesn't respect strength. They consume it. If my parents knew I had money, the kind of money that changes outcomes, not just outfits, my mother would have turned my life into her social calendar. My father would have tried to help with investments and managed them into mediocrity. Evan would have competed, sabotaged, sued, or tried to claim a piece of it like he was entitled to oxygen. By being the quiet conservator, I became invisible. And because I was invisible, I was unsupervised. While Evan curated his image, I read contracts. While he bought status, I bought structure. While he practiced being impressive, I practiced being untouchable. Sunday brunch at my parents' estate was a theatrical production, and Evan was the star. A patio table loaded with imported cheeses and smoked salmon and pastries arranged like decoration. Nobody ate. Eating is messy. Messy is human. My family prefers the appearance of hunger to actual appetite. Evan arrived wearing a grin and a new watch. Platinum, heavy, the kind of thing designed to catch sunlight and attention. He held it out without being asked. $80 grand, he said. Put it on my card. Once Caldera closes tomorrow, 80 is a rounding error. My father laughed, delighted, slicing fruit like he was performing precision. You earned it, he told Evan. This deal secures the family legacy. My mother's eyes shone with pride. It's such a relief, she said, looking pointedly at me, to know at least one of my children understands the real world. Then her gaze flicked to my hands, scrubbed clean but still betraying the work I do. And Mara, she added, voice soft with condescension, Mara preserves the past. Evan leaned back like a king granting mercy. Actually, he said, after tomorrow I could help you out, Mara. I could float you a little loan, fix up your lab, upgrade that car, maybe buy something that doesn't smell like chemicals. My mother beamed at him like he'd invented generosity. Oh, Evan, sweetheart, that's wonderful. Mara, don't be stubborn. Your brother is offering you help. I lifted my coffee cup. The porcelain was thin and expensive, like everything in that house. Fragile things pretending to be permanent. I looked at Evan, an empty suit convinced he was a man of substance. I looked at my parents, two people who measured love in applause and stock options. They were so confident, so loud. They had no idea Evan's watch was debt disguised as pride. They had no idea the collateral he was counting on was already gone. They had no idea his lifeline was imaginary. Thank you, I said, voice steady. But I'll manage. Evan scoffed, checking his reflection in the back of a spoon. Suit yourself. Some people just like being small. I took a sip of cold coffee and didn't grimace. I let the bitterness sit on my tongue. I watched them toast to a victory that had already been removed from the board. And I said absolutely nothing. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of gravity. At 8:59 a.m., Evan was in his glass office at Northline, posture perfect, tie straight, waiting for the call that would crown him. He was probably already composing a humble brag post in his head. At exactly 9:00 a.m., my monitors confirmed what I already knew. Then the public narrative snapped into place. Headlines rolled across terminals and feeds, fast and merciless. Nightjar Capital to acquire Caldera Systems in $62 billion deal. My phone lit up like a fire alarm. My mother, my father, Evan. I didn't answer, because silence isn't emptiness. Silence is kinetic energy held in reserve. Every time Evan mocked me and I didn't respond, I wasn't submitting. I was storing energy, Every time my parents ignored me and I didn't beg for attention, I wasn't losing. I was compressing the spring. People mistake quiet for weakness because they can't imagine discipline. It takes discipline to say nothing when you could ruin someone with the truth. It takes control to let someone dig their own grave while you stand there holding the shovel they think is a ladder. And Evan? Evan was about to learn what the loud never learn until it's too late. Losing Caldera wasn't the worst thing that could happen to him that day. Because Evan didn't just want the deal. He'd leveraged himself on it. He'd pushed aggressive financing terms to make the numbers look impressive. He'd pledged assets. He'd promised future revenue. He treated debt like a tool. But debt is also a leash. And who holds the leash matters. That morning, another transaction occurred. Quiet, normal, the kind of thing that happens every day in finance. The debt package tied to Northline's acquisition plan was sold on the secondary market. Not uncommon. What was uncommon was who bought the controlling portion. Nightjar did, and with it came rights embedded in the fine print, rights that become very real when the music stops, rights to enforce, rights to accelerate, rights to demand, rights that don't care about Evan's ego. My phone continued buzzing. Voicemails stacked up. Messages came in frantic bursts. What is happening? Call me right now. This isn't funny. Your brother needs you. Needs me. As if I was still the family's quiet little utility item. As if my purpose was to cushion Evan's fall. Around late morning, a message came through to my secure line. A creditor meeting had been scheduled. Not at Northline. At a neutral site used for sensitive negotiations, a renovated power station downtown called The Foundry. Concrete, glass, private elevators, no signage, no tourist appeal. The kind of place that doesn't exist unless you already know it does. I left my lab methodically. I hung up my coat, washed my hands, locked the doors. Then I changed. Not into a costume, not into some cartoon version of power, just into a uniform the world takes seriously. A charcoal suit, clean lines, no jewelry, hair pinned back. The kind of look that doesn't scream wealth. It signals inevitability. They arrived late. Evan, my parents, two lawyers who looked like they'd been bleeding sleep for weeks. I was already seated at the table, calm, hands folded, a slim folder in front of me. The door opened. Evan stepped in first, eyes frantic, face strained. He stopped when he saw me. His brain tried to reject it. "Mara?" he said, voice cracking. What are you doing here?" My mother followed, saw me, and froze as if her body had forgotten how to move without social permission. My father's mouth opened slightly, then closed again, like he was trying to find a script and realizing there wasn't one. I slid the folder across the table. Evan didn't sit. He stared at it like it might bite. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. "Mr. Hale," he began, addressing Evan. "Nightjar Capital is—" "I know who Nightjar is," Evan snapped. "They're the buyer who stole Caldera." I tilted my head. "Not stole," I said softly. "Purchased." Evan's laugh came out too sharp, too brittle. "This is insane," he said. "You don't have $62 billion. I nodded once. "Correct," I said. "I don't. My investors do. The funds do. My partners do. And I'm authorized." Evan finally opened the folder. The documents inside were boring, clean, lethal. Proof of Nightjar's stake in the debt package, the enforcement notice, the restructuring proposal, the deadlines, the consequences. His face changed as he read. Not anger first. Confusion. The kind of confusion someone feels when reality refuses to obey the hierarchy they memorized. My mother whispered, barely audible, "Mara, you work at an archive." "I do," I said. "That's my job." Then I looked at Evan, not with hatred, not with triumph, but with clinical clarity. "And this," I added, "is my work." Evan's hands trembled as he flipped pages faster. "This has to be a joke," he muttered. "It's not," I said. He landed on the part that mattered. His shoulders sank, like his body finally understood what his mind had been avoiding. He looked up at me, eyes wet with a panic he didn't know how to disguise. "Are you going to destroy us?" he asked. The room went still. My mother's breath hitched. My father stared at me like he was seeing his daughter for the first time in decades and realizing he'd never bothered to learn what she was capable of. I stood, not to intimidate, but because I didn't want to speak from the same level as Evan anymore. "I could," I said evenly, "and legally it would be clean." Evan flinched. I continued, measured, deliberate. "But I'm not here for revenge as entertainment. I'm here for correction." That word sat in the air like a judge's gavel. Correction. "Northline remains the public face," I said. "You keep your title. You keep your office. You keep pretending you're the star." Evan's eyes narrowed. "But," I added, "Nightjar controls risk. Nightjar approves acquisitions. Nightjar approves leverage. Nightjar approves your bonuses." His jaw tightened. "A leash," he whispered. "Accountability," I replied. Then I turned my eyes to my parents. "For years," I said quietly, "you rewarded noise." My mother's lips parted as if she wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. The truth was too plain. Too documented. Evan stared back down at the papers. It wasn't a win. It was a golden cage built out of signatures and deadlines. And he would accept it, because the only thing Evan feared more than control was becoming irrelevant. I slid a pen toward him. "Sign," I said. "Or by close of business, you start losing assets you didn't even know you pledged." Evan hesitated for about 2 seconds. Then he signed. My parents watched in silence, shrinking into their seats, finally understanding that they'd spent 30 years worshiping the loudest person in the room while the real power sat quietly somewhere else. I didn't stay for apologies. Apologies are often just another performance, and I was done attending their shows. I left the lawyers to explain details and walked out into the winter air, breathing like I'd just stepped out of someone else's life. I drove back across the city to the Maritime Archive, back to fluorescent lights and quiet hums, back to work that doesn't care who your parents love more. I unlocked my lab, set my bag down, rolled up my sleeves. On my table was a brittle ship log from 1891, ink faded, paper warped, spine cracked like old bone. I heated the adhesive mixture carefully, checked the temperature, tested it on scrap. The scent rose, faint, chemical, familiar. The smell Evan mocked. And as I pressed the repaired paper gently into place, I felt something settle in me that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with reality. Power isn't the crown. Power is the hand that decides who gets to wear it. If you've ever had to hide your competence just to survive in a family that only respects volume, you're not alone. Tell me in the comments, would you have offered the restructuring deal, or would you have pulled the plug and watched it all burn?